Welcome into Sportsmemo's Saturday college basketball betting podcast with our guest, Robbie Veno. Robbie, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
I am doing good today, Drew. How about yourself?
I'm doing good. I'm excited to break down these college basketball games for the Saturday card. Robbie, in my opinion, the Saturday college basketball card is the best sport and day to bet in all of major sports betting out there, just as far as the number of games, the number of things for the odds makers to do. I believe that it's a sports bettor's greatest advantage as far as day in sport to bet. Do you agree with me?
It certainly, I would say to your point, gives us advantages, Drew, because when you have 100 plus games on the card, now that we have extra board games on the card, right, every single day, it leaves the chances open for opportunity. There's just too many games for odds makers to take a thorough look at. Obviously, power ratings will dictate lines, and a major injury here or there might affect one. But when you comb through the card the way that we do as bettors and handicappers, starting on Friday morning with the power ratings, you get about a good 24 hours to go over the whole thing. You'll find some spots. You'll definitely find some spots. So we'll see where the openers come out. I've got power ratings up for projected lines for tomorrow's games already, and I do agree with you that it presents a lot of opportunity. Just the mass amount of games lends itself to favor the bettors.
And Robbie, let's start off right at the top. We got 601-602, Virginia at Duke. This is a key game in the ACC. Duke having changes, point guard position, Trey Jones being injured. It's interesting to see where the odds makers are coming out with this line. We're filming this midday on Friday, so lines are not out yet as we're speaking about this. It looks like Ken Palm has it Duke 71, Virginia 69. You're in line with that as well, putting Duke as 3.5-point favorites in Cameron. And just going by Ken Palm's numbers, seeing 140 as the total. So you're having Duke minus 3.5 with about a 140 total. What advantages do you think we might have Saturday when the numbers come out, Robbie?
Well, the first thing and the most important thing that's been talked about ad nauseum here is the injury to Trey Jones, right, at point guard. Despite the fact that the team has R.J. Barrett, despite the fact that they have Zion Williamson, despite the fact that Cam Reddish is going to be back for this game, the point that keeps getting drilled home here is that Duke is not the same team without Trey Jones. Whether or not we're going to find out, right? They did lose one game. They lost to Syracuse their last time out. Jones gets hurt in that game. Mike Krzyzewski, for what it's worth, Drew, has already stated, I think earlier this morning, that this injury is not as serious as it's been made out to be, that Jones, he's not even ruling out the possibility that he doesn't play tomorrow in this contest. It's a stretch, but he thinks if not this game, maybe next game. If not next game, certainly the second game they play next week, he'll be back in the lineup. So it's not like it's a month-long injury. They have to deal with Virginia here, and it probably is a bad draw for Duke to have Virginia up as the team to play without Jones because of the way Virginia plays defense here. You really need that pure point guard leader. Duke won't have that in this game. Virginia can hound you. Obviously, Kyle Guy, Ty Jerome and company are fantastic here. Virginia has played much better offense than what we're accustomed to seeing out of them. I know that, the snail's pace is still the same, but they're so efficient this season. Might pose a little bit of trouble here. I'm interested to see, if you boil it all down, Drew, how these freshmen react to upper-class laden defense as good as Virginia's. Things should not come as easily to Williamson, Barrett, Reddish and company as they've come so far this year against other opponents. For me, and we'll see where the line comes out, for me, I would probably say Virginia's worth a look. If my projected number of 3.5 comes out, plus 3.5 would be worth a look. And the 140 probably sits in a really good place here. I don't think Duke's going to be able to get carried away offensively against Virginia. So it dependent upon how much emphasis the odds makers place on Trey Jones' injury, that will probably be the deciding factor whether or not I get involved.
And Robbie, before we get too far into this podcast, got to mention something. You're off an 8-0 night, right?
I am. As a matter of fact, I am.
Man, those feel good. I can't. I don't know if I can count the number of 8-0 nights I've had on two hands, and I've been in this business, strictly in this business, for 5 years now. So hats off to you, Robbie. And another trend that's coming to fruition here is the night before you're on the podcast, you're on an 18-0 run. Is that right? Yeah,
it's crazy, Drew. We talk about, or I talk about at least, because I'm not a technical trend player, how many meaningless, useless trends there are out there. I don't know if the listeners will consider this meaningless or useless, but the last 4 times we've podcast, the night before, 4-0, 4-0, 2-0, and 8-0 makes 18-0 the night before a podcast. So take it for what it's worth, but it's been very, very good the night before you and I come on together to do a pod.
All right, Robbie. Well, maybe somebody can take from these trends is, are you free on Tuesday to do a college basketball or NBA podcast?
Absolutely.
All right, so let's schedule you for Tuesday, and so that Monday card might be a good one to get from Robbie. On code, we got Weekend 24 for either Robbie or myself. Looking at this Saturday college basketball card, you also get the any NFL games that we each put out. We both have one up there at sportsmemo.com. So if you're checking out with either myself or Robbie or both, you can get both of us for under $50 using the coupon code WEEKEND24 at checkout. We'll give all access through Sunday night for just $24. That's Robbie Veno or myself or both for under $50. Coupon code WEEKEND24 at checkout. Robbie, next game up, 627-628 Cincinnati at Wichita State. Your number's showing Cincinnati -1 on the road. Ken Palm showing at 69-65, giving us a total of 134. How would you look to bet Cincinnati, Wichita State?
Yeah, I've had a little bit of a squeeze on these numbers now, Drew, because Wichita State, since conference play has begun, has steadily gone up little by little. Since conference play has begun, Cincinnati has gone down little by little. One team doing better against the number, that would be Wichita State in their conference games, and Cincinnati not really living up to expectations where the number is concerned so far. So that's the reason why I think we see it now, as far as my power ratings are concerned, all the way down to Cincinnati on the road -1. I think if this game had been played 2 weeks ago, we'd be looking at a much bigger number. But beyond the point spread in this game, Drew, I think what we need to take a look at right now, and I know that folks started noticing this last game, you can just tell by the way the numbers are jumping. Wichita State's becoming an over team here for Greg Marshall. The season obviously did not start out in Wichita State fashion, at least not the way we know Wichita State to be. They were getting beat pretty soundly in some instances, and in most games, I don't want to call them lucky, but in dogfights, in a lot of games where we are used to seeing Wichita State either go away for a December tournament and win it or win by big margin, I think he's remolded this team now into a team that's going to play with some pace and some offensive efficiency. If you look at their conference games since American Athletic Play started, you've got a 159 game total against Memphis, 85-74 final, 166, which went into OT with Temple. However, I think at the end of regulation, that was 148. Those two games you can almost have some justification for by saying, well, Memphis plays up tempo. Well, Temple plays high-scoring games all the time. Okay, the third game on the list is Houston, and then followed by Central Florida. Those two games, the results posted 149 and 142. Houston and Central Florida are two of the best defenses not only in this conference but in the nation. Houston, according to Ken Palm's numbers, ranks number 15 in defensive efficiency. UCF ranks number 50. So when you can drag those two teams to a game above 140, you're doing something. And Cincinnati sits right in between those two defensive efficiency marks. They're number 34 right now. Wouldn't be surprised to see Wichita State exceed the total again if we just, once again, we're using Ken Palm's projected numbers here for totals. because we don't have Saturday's numbers in front of us right now, but he's calling for a game to be in the 134 range. And I just gave you two examples of teams with defenses as good, if not better, than Cincinnati's, where Wichita State got 149, got the game up to 149, and got the game up to 142. So perhaps there's still value inside this Wichita State team to continue playing over. I wouldn't be surprised at all, Drew, when the opener comes out, if it doesn't get pushed up right away. Cincinnati will likely be focused on slowing the game down and trying to rough it up the way they like. But I've watched Wichita State play now for the past couple of weeks, and I don't know at this point in time if I could be swayed to bet under 134 in any of their games. So I'm going to look at that game possibly over the total. We'll see where the money carries it right off the bat. You don't want to get too excited, but right now it looks as if anything below 140 should be an overplay with Wichita State.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, Cincinnati doesn't run too much pace. They're a 300 team in terms of pace. So does that scare you a little bit, Robbie, that they might muck it up a bit?
Well, it doesn't, because UCF is a 328 pace, and somehow Wichita State got them to get to 142, and Houston is a 287 pace. Neither of those teams like to get up and down the floor, so I think that the pace doesn't really scare me here. It's the efficiency and the effectiveness that Wichita State is playing offense with right now. I think those are two great examples, Houston and UCF, the two prior games, to not really scare you or sway you off of playing Wichita State over right now. I think they are the deciding force, so to speak, if we're talking about imposing will. Not that this game is going to be a track meet by any means, but where free throws are concerned, where shots made are concerned, I think right now you have to look at Wichita State from an over perspective.
All right, good stuff, Robbie. Good stats there. We got 651, 652. Heading to the SEC, Kentucky at Auburn. Looks like you got Auburn 5.5. I don't have Ken Palm's numbers in front of me, but how would you look to bet the Wildcats and Tigers here?
Yeah, the Ken Palm numbers show Auburn by -4. So I'm about 1.5 points higher on that contest than he is. It's a little bit of a difference in philosophy. Obviously, Bruce Pearl's team guard-oriented and loves to play at pace. Kentucky, not so much pace this year. They've become a little more defensive-oriented. The last two games especially, John Calipari's team holds Vanderbilt to 47 points and then holds Georgia to 49 points. Two games back-to-back holding SEC opponents under 50, and two teams, Drew, that play more offensive style than defensive style. Bryce Drew's team at Vandy has lended itself to offense this year, even without their star freshman point guard who got hurt about a month ago. And Georgia under Tom Crean has become more of an offensive team than they were under Mark Fox. So I guess to hold those two under 50, your last two contests, that's pretty solid defense. And it usually takes Coach Cal a while to get his team to get it through his team's head, because it's always so freshman dominated, that they have to play defense. Perhaps he's seeing a turn of the corner here. Auburn's a different animal from Vanderbilt and Georgia for sure. Auburn had a SEC opener where they didn't play well against Ole Miss, didn't shoot the ball well in that game, but boy, last Saturday they came back and they absolutely blew Georgia out, scored 93 points. Played A&M during the week, blew them out, scored 85 points, and they're going to run into a little bit more of a buzzsaw now too. So it's an interesting clash between the guard-oriented offense of Auburn here and the seemingly now defensive-minded Kentucky Wildcats. I think in that case, I would lean toward the home team. Auburn has the ability to score huge in spurts. If this game is -4 rather than the -5.5 that my power ratings project, I think Auburn might be worth an immediate look, but I wouldn't be surprised to see this game get bet up a little bit. I would think that most bettors keeping power ratings are likely to have this game shaded more towards the end that I have it rather than the end that Ken Palm has it.
Yeah, Robbie, that's a good breakdown there. You bring up the fact that Kentucky has held their last two SEC opponents under 50 points, 47 to Vanderbilt, 49 to Georgia. A lot of that, in my opinion, has to do with Ashton Hagens, the point guard. He can really guard the opposing team's ball handler. And that's really where the defense starts. If you can't stop the other guy's point guard from driving the lane, you're in big trouble, and Kentucky can. And that's one thing that I've noticed in SEC play so far. I haven't been involved with them other than the Vanderbilt game. I was on that under. But that's something that I would look for when betting Kentucky games is he can really play some defense. So as long as he's out there, I would look to play really on Kentucky and on Kentucky under the total. We got a couple more games here, Robbie. What's up next? Rotation number 671, 672 heading out west. UCLA, USC, the battle for Los Angeles. Looks like you're showing Bruins -4. Ken Palm kind of disagreeing with you here. Interesting. That has the Trojans winning at home 78-77. We know there's a lot of changes on the Bruins side coaching-wise. 155 the total here, Robbie. It is a high total. How would you look to bet the Bruins and Trojans?
Well, I'll say this. Regardless of how I would bet the game, Drew, the money's going to come in on UCLA over the total. The amount of money that's come in on UCLA over the total since the coaching change has been really unbelievable. I mean, against Oregon a couple games ago, Oregon, a team that under Dana Altman this year and with the youth situation and with the injury situation to Bol, who's out for the rest of the season, they're just not an offensive-minded team. That game opened 139.5, got bet all the way to 148.5, not based on Oregon offense, based on UCLA. And it wound up getting over the total. I can't remember if it made it in regulation or if it needed the overtime, but the game did go to overtime, winds up 171. Next game, Wayne Tinkle's Oregon State team at home against UCLA, total bet from 147 up to 153.5, another 6.5 point move, not based on Oregon State pace or Oregon State high scoring offense, based on UCLA, which has gone to pretty much a full court pressing style right now, Drew, and that's creating a lot of this action toward UCLA over. Now, it should be noted that the UCLA-Oregon State game opened 147 and fell 145, so it fell short of the opener. Never mind being pushed up 6.5 points to 153.5. All that over money went down the drain in that game. Oregon State found a way to keep UCLA from scoring points. I think the only way you keep UCLA off the board right now with the style that they're playing, Drew, is if they have a bad shooting night. Against USC, I wouldn't anticipate a bad shooting night, only because Andy Enfeld's team, we remember him from Florida Gulf Coast and Dunk City, but Enfeld, who's been here now for about 4 years, has his team playing at as high a pace as really USC has played at since he got there. So we're going to get a track meet out of this. Again, I wouldn't be surprised if this total, when it opens, gets pushed up. The bettors have shown us that they like UCLA overs at this point in time. I don't know how much the most recent game, the Oregon State UCLA game, will kind of sway bettors off of betting UCLA over. I don't think it'll have an effect for this game here. If it comes 155, the way Ken Palm is showing, I think we'll see over money probably as high as 58, 59 before it settles in. So if you like the over, try to get there first. And this evening when the openers come, because I don't think you'll get a better number than that. And you probably will get a track meet here. I wouldn't be surprised if this game ends up landing in the 160s as far as the game result is concerned. So you might have a lot of leeway to work with here if you're betting over.
Yeah, and Robbie, that's a good point to get in. You can even get in. Again, we're filming this on Friday. You can get in on Fridays. I believe BetOnline leads the market, and it's very low limits as far as totals go and sides. I believe it's $250, and then Chris opens up shortly thereafter, the Costa Rican International Sportsbook or bookmaker. If you're in the United States, which most listeners are, opens up right after with Heritage. So any of those three books should be open by I'd say 5 or 6 o'clock on Fridays if you're looking to get in on these moves before they get a lot of action. So and again, a lot of them you can bet it and then wait a minute or two and then bet it again. So even though it is low limits, you can get a good amount down. But Robbie, we got another game here. 673-674 TCU at Kansas State in the Big 12. Kansas State minus 3.5 according to your numbers. Looks like another disagreement with you and Ken Palm. That could mean some value here, Robbie. We got 66-65. He's showing TCU winning on the road. That would give us a total of 131. How would you look to bet the TCU K-State game?
Yeah, there is a significant difference here between the two numbers. Like you say, I got K-State -3. He's got TCU -1, so that makes a 4-point difference, a little bit of a gap. It leads you to look into the game a little bit further. I think what may not be accounted for yet by Ken Palm that maybe is accounted for a little bit more by myself, because I know off of the last two games and the last two victories, I gave Kansas State a considerable boost in their power rating number. It's the return of Dean Wade at center for K-State. Now, I don't know how much Ken Palm's raw numbers figure the return of Dean Wade into his calculation here. It probably takes a few games before K-State's number catches up to what it should be. But Dean Wade, the 6'10", 6'11" center for Kansas State, is a very significant piece to that puzzle. This is a team that some prognosticators out there thought could win the Big 12 Conference heading into this year. So Bruce Weber's team certainly came in with high expectations. They lost Wade for a while. They didn't get off to a good start in Big 12 Conference play without him. But the last two road wins, very, very impressive. They went on the road. Dean Wade returned last Saturday against Iowa State. We saw that number come down. I think Iowa State had been as high as -10 at home in Ames. The announcement came that Wade was going to play. I think it closed around 8.5, so K-State drew some money. And K-State went to Iowa State and won that ball game straight up, which is very, very significant because from an offensive standpoint, Iowa State and TCU are very comparable in what they can produce point-wise. So I think that's something to take note of, that Kansas State was able to go on the road, slow Iowa State down, force them into a horrendous shooting night or afternoon. Iowa State did not shoot the ball at home well, and then bounce right back, go on the road to Norman, Oklahoma, and beat Oklahoma straight up. Now they're home. There are a couple conflicting numbers here, though, Drew, which makes this a difficult game to handicap if you're going by fundamentals. Fundamentally, TCU, by leaps and bounds at this point in time, which is about 4 games into the Big 12 season, TCU is the best shooting team, the best offensive team, like I say, by leaps and bounds in this league at this point statistically. They're the best effective field goal percentage. They're the best three-point shooting team. I think that comes into play because Kansas State has the second worst three-point shooting defense amongst Big 12 teams through 4 Big 12 games. So that's a key thing to look at here is the TCU three-point shooting in this game. However, K-State's guards, Barry Brown and company, they hound the opposition. If anybody watched that Iowa State game, you could see they made Iowa State's guards uncomfortable all game long. And for TCU, without Jalen Fisher now, this is a team that runs a 7-man rotation and 3 upperclassmen led by Alex Robinson, their star guard. And then there's 4 underclassmen that round out this 7-man rotation, 3 freshmen and a sophomore. So it's a youthful team led by a couple of 3 juniors and seniors up top, and they balance out the scoring. But I'm very, very interested to see Kansas State, a team that forces the most turnovers in the Big 12, the team that hounds the guards. You were just talking about Kentucky's ability with their point guard to pressure teams and make them uncomfortable when they set up offensively half court. K-State did that to Iowa State. Would not be surprised if they do that to TCU. This certainly is a contrast battle here because TCU wants to play 70 to 75 possessions, maybe more. They want to get up and down the floor. They want this game to be 75 points or higher. K-State wants nothing like that. They want this game to be played low 60s or less. Right now, I'd lean towards Kansas State, Drew. I think that Wade makes that much of a difference. I think that I think it was announced now that Jalen Fisher's out for the season. So when he had come back, Texas Christian had rattled off an 8-0 against the spread run with Jalen Fisher in the lineup, and then he gets hurt again. And then they failed to cover their very next game. It's a different team without him. Give Jamie Dixon credit. He's working with a young team. He's working with a short rotation. I just think that that's too much to overcome here. If Kansas State's only a 3-point favorite, I think they'll probably cover that number.
Yeah, I'm with you, Robbie. I mean, especially if Fisher's out. I'm surprised to see Ken Palm's number 66-65. Do your numbers factor in injuries?
Well, after the first result last Saturday against Iowa State, because I think at the time, Drew, doing this off the top of my head, I believe that my power rating showed Kansas State to have the second lowest power rating inside the Big 12. After the win against Iowa State, that was such a difference between my projected line and what ended up happening. K-State got bumped up. Again, they had a huge margin between what was projected and what happened in the Oklahoma game. They got bumped up again. So I have considerably, significantly boosted Kansas State for the return of Dean Wade, which seems to be a very important piece to their puzzle. We know it's an important piece to their puzzle. He's their big guy, and he's an all-around big guy. He's not just a stiff that stands under the basket. So yeah, I've made that adjustment. It was about, I think, Drew, after 2 games, it's about 6.5 points to the positive for K-State with Dean Wade that I moved it. I just don't know that Ken Palm moves them that quickly off of player base. I think this is very much numerically done without consideration for the so-called human element, right?
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I agree with you. Robbie, we got the coupon code here, Weekend24 for Robbie's All Access for the weekend, or myself. That's Weekend24 at checkout. You'll get Robbie's college basketball and NFL games, plus NBA as well. And other than that, Robbie, anything else you want to throw out? I know you had something on Syracuse, maybe?
Yeah, real quick, Drew, the last time we podcast, or maybe the time before, I had mentioned that perhaps it was a good time to start looking at Syracuse. It seemed that, Frank Howard had been in that lineup enough games to where they were turning a corner. And Syracuse, as we all know, goes out and beats Duke the other night, 95-91 in overtime as a 17-point underdog. Now, we know Trey Jones gets hurt in that game and doesn't play, but still to win that game outright at Duke, extremely impressive. Prior to that, the game we had talked about was the Clemson game. Syracuse went out and beat Clemson by 8 points and covered 2 games before that. In between, they threw in a little bit of a clunker against Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech won that game by double digits. Georgia Tech also a team that's playing real good basketball right now for their coach Brian Gregory. But I think Syracuse is still very, very worthy of looks. We'll see where they come up tomorrow. I think my power ratings made them a 9.5 point favorite over Pittsburgh tomorrow, which to me I'm a little leery to lay that much. Pittsburgh's played well also under Jeff Capel, but for me, Syracuse in that ACC, still a little bit of an under-the-radar team and one that maybe we can cash some more tickets with.
Good stuff, Robbie. Great podcast for the Saturday college basketball. Feel free to reach out to Robbie on Twitter at Rob Veno Sports or myself at Drew Martin Betts. Let us know what you want to hear on Tuesday's podcast, what games you're interested in the analysis on. Guys, the coupon code is Weekend24 for Rob Veno or myself, Drew Martin's all-access package, college basketball, NBA, and the NFL Championship weekend service there. That's Weekend24. You can get both for under $50 there. So guys, thanks for tuning in. Best of luck with your bets. We'll be back on Monday with Teddy Covers NFL opening line report for the Super Bowl.